Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Obviously, one of the big things that sets Warzone apart from a lot of other battle royales out there is the loadout system. The whole ability to get your own custom class during the game, which pretty much eliminates a lot of the RNG aspect that other BRs have. But especially after the Cold War integration, loadouts have become a bit tricky because things simply aren't working as intended. We're talking attachments not doing the right things. Some say they do one thing and they actually do another. Some say they do one thing and they just don't do it at all. Some work just fine. So today we're basically going through every single attachment category and breaking down what you need to be looking for when building your next loadout. So if you enjoy the video at any point, or if you just find it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, or if you're watching but you aren't already subscribed, this is the place to be to stay on top of all things going on in Call of Duty. So if you like what you see, feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. So for the most part, attachments are going to be working the same on most weapons regardless of what category they're in, with the exception of things like the shotguns, which do have some different options, whereas things like the rifles, the SMGs, the LMGs, even the snipers all have pretty similar attachment choices, just with different names, but ultimately they pretty much do the same thing. So starting first with the muzzle category, this is by far one of the easiest categories we have, just because it is a very, very obvious choice. On the Modern Warfare weapons, the monolithic suppressor is the way to go 99.9% of the time. There are a few instances where there may be a better choice, like on the MP5 we have the monolithic integral suppressor, which is actually a barrel option, or on the Odin we have the Colossus suppressor. But having an option that hides you on the minimap when shooting and extends your range is two huge bonuses you definitely want to take advantage of. Now, same deal on the Cold War weapons, but here the go-to attachment is going to be either the GRU suppressor or the agency silencer / suppressor. Those are basically the monolithic suppressor in disguise. Now, like I said, the shotguns do have some different choices here since they do function in a different way. So there for the Modern Warfare weapons, the choke is usually the way to go for better range than also the tighter pellet spread. Then on the Cold War shotties, I honestly don't think there's a muzzle that is necessarily fantastic. Most of the time I'd actually forego using one and just use that spot somewhere else. But if you're dead set on running one, you absolutely have to use a muzzle. The agency choke is about as good as it gets. You can make up for the sprint to fire and the range losses with some other attachments, but again, we don't really have any standout options there. Now, moving on into the barrels, this is by far one of the most important categories to know what you're looking for because a lot of the barrels, especially on the Cold War weapons, aren't doing what they're supposed to. Specifically, the Task Force barrel just straight up is not doing what it says. The damage, the range, and the velocity increases are not accurate whatsoever, but the cons are, I'm pretty sure, so you're basically running at a loss if you choose to go with that one. Now, Cold War weapons currently suffer a lot from low velocity and then also just subpar ranges, which is why you really want to look for the barrel that increases your bullet velocity. For instance, the Ranger barrel is a great option on most Cold War weapons, or also the Recon, the Combat Recon I think it's called, on the snipers. Also on the Cold War shotguns, the reinforced heavy option really isn't too bad either since the range and the fire rate both end up increasing a bit as well. Now on the Modern Warfare weapons, again this is a pretty easy category because these attachments actually function as intended, and here you're looking for whatever barrel ends up increasing the range and the control, then also usually the velocity as well. This is typically the longest barrel option, and that's what you're looking for on pretty much any weapon. Assault rifle, SMG, sniper, pistol, you name it. Now the laser category is a bit weird just because you're only wanting to use this on very specific weapons. Mostly SMGs or pistols, occasionally snipers too for some better accuracy, then also the shotguns as well. On anything you're going to be dual wielding, or on weapons you're going to be hip firing a lot with, so pretty much just shotguns and pistols, the 5mW laser is the way to go on both Modern Warfare and Cold War weapons. Then outside of that, really the only laser sight worth running is the TAC laser on the Modern Warfare weapons, where you want a bit more mobility and then also some more stability. So personally, I'll run this on things like the Grau and the Cars since I use those a lot at range, and that does help a bit when it just comes to staying on target. But this really is not a super important category the vast majority of the time. Next up, we've got the optics, and this area largely comes down to personal preference. Everyone's got their favorites for sure, but the standouts here for the Cold War weapons are definitely the Microflex LED, which is basically just like your standard red dot sight, then also the 3x optic as well for any weapon you might want some better range visibility with. And then on the Modern Warfare weapons, the blue dot hollow sight is as clean as can be, Then the VLK 3x optic actually provides a slight recoil buff with some great visibility too, so that's what I'd recommend there. Then moving on into the stock area, gonna be honest, this is a category that just doesn't really get used in a lot of my setups just because there are better alternatives. But on the Modern Warfare weapons, typically you want to stay away from no stock just because of the insane recoil increase. If you are using one, the ADS speed enhancing ones are usually the best bet. So things like the close quarters stock or the skeleton stocks are going to be ideal. Now on the Cold War weapons, things are actually quite the opposite. Stocks here are pretty wild, especially the 5th stock in most cases. Usually it's going to be the SAS combat stock. This increases your ADS strafing speed a ton. And for instance, on things like the FFAR, it's going to make a huge difference and make the weapon feel even more effective. That said, the Raider stock is also pretty good, and if you're not a higher level yet, the no stock option isn't too bad here because the recoil is not like it is on the Modern Warfare no stock option, so that's also a decent choice too. Now, moving into the underbarrels, the grips here for Modern Warfare are pretty straightforward. On SMGs, most of the time you want to be using the Merc foregrip. On rifles and LMGs and whatnot, Commando is usually the best bet. But when it comes to Cold War, things really aren't as straightforward. Currently, it comes down to 2 different grips. The Field Agent, which is great for what it's worth. It's going to help out with your overall control on the vast majority of weapons. But in certain cases, the Bruiser grip, as JGod recently discovered, is actually pretty broken, and it helps a lot with recoil control as well, despite not saying that's what it's meant for. This is another case where the attachment says it does one thing, and in fact it does something entirely different. Now, the only thing here is this is a weapon by weapon case. You know, sometimes the Bruiser grip is worth it over the Field Agent, sometimes it isn't, and it really comes down to individual testing, unfortunately, but those are the main 2 ones you want to look out for there. Now, for ammo, again, this is a very basic category. On Modern Warfare weapons, anything with a larger mag is going to be the wave because that's going to make cleanups and squad wipes way easier. On shotguns, Dragon's Breath can also be a game changer too, although I'm just not a fan of it because, let's be real, no one wants to be on fire like that. Then on the Cold War weapons, same deal on most aggressive weapons. The larger mag is definitely the way to go. The fast mags, if they fully get fixed, are going to be ideal, but on a lot of weapons, they don't actually reload any faster. Again, though, that is a case-by-case scenario. Then for rear grips, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you already know the drill on the Modern Warfare weapons. The stipple grip tape, the stippy grippy, all day long. You never really want to use anything else there. And then on the Cold War weapons, usually the Serpent Wrap is the best choice, although it doesn't have a huge overall impact. That said, the Airborne Elastic Wrap or the Final Wrap on those weapons can seem pretty enticing. It's got a lot of pros, but it actually is not functioning as intended, so that's another one you definitely want to stay away from. Then to close things out, on the Modern Warfare weapons exclusively, we've got the perk option. I feel like this should be available on the Cold War weapons too, sort of to, I guess, balance things out. You know, we have things like Fully Loaded. That's one you always want to have on one of your specific regain classes and not just like your normal classes. But unfortunately, we don't have that option for Cold War weapons as of now. But for the most part here, you don't need perks on most of your weapon setups. But here and there, Sleight of Hand can be pretty useful. I like to run it on things like my MP5 or focus on these semi-auto weapons or the snipers just to reduce your overall flinch. Most of these, though, are pretty much useless when it comes down to it. So, there you have it. With all of that being said, those are the main things you want to be looking out for when making a class setup and ultimately a loadout here in Warzone, and that is going to wrap things up for today. If you enjoyed the video, or if you just found it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. And, of course, if you're new here and you want to stay up to date with pretty much everything going on in COD, from news to intel to updates to setups to tips, you name it, you're going to find it all right here on the channel. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. That way you'll always know whenever I upload a new video. As always, if you want to check out any of my partners, be sure to use code WhosImmortal for a spicy discount on all Scuff, G Fuel, and Control Freak products, and the links for all those can be found down in the description below. But once again, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.